Pastor Jared here with another book review. This time, The Case for Faith by Lee Strobel. This book is a great book. I really enjoy it. One of the things that makes this book unique is it starts off with a little time that Lee Strobel spent with a gentleman named Charles Templeton. Now, if you go back enough in history, some older generation would know of him. He was actually more famous. Charles Templeton was more famous than Billy Graham. And he was actually a evangelist and speaker. And what ended up happening is he didn't know how to answer some questions that challenged his faith, such as the problem evil. And because he could never reconcile these things in the Christian faith, he slowly walked away from the evangelistic movement and eventually left the faith. And the book starts off with Lee Strobel interacting with Charles Templeton, and Templeton talking about his struggle and these questions that he couldn't answer, he couldn't reconcile. And so it has a very compelling intro. And Charles Templeton asks the questions, as Lee Strobel is going to do, ask the questions. A lot of questions are uncomfortable answering. They don't know how to answer it. And some of them can be quite challenging. And so this book, Case for Faith, does that. It goes at those hard questions that there isn't an easy answer. And the people who do not get an answer to these questions often end up leaving the faith. So, Case for Faith is a good book. It's a book that Christians should read because it will help strengthen their faith to answer these difficult questions. Now, as you can see, this cover that you see I have here and the one here, this is actually an old copy of a book. This is one of the original copies. Since then, it's gone through a lot of different book covers. This seems to be the new book cover here. Just change it a little bit. The other interesting thing about this book is when Lee Strobel first wrote this book, um, the one I have has Ravi Zachariah. Now, of course, since then, some unfortunate news have been found out about Ravi Zachariah. And so in Lee Strobel's new edition, the chapter that Ravi Zachariah, where Lee Strobel interviews him, he's dropped that and added a different author to answer his questions so that won't be a hindrance. So the new edition doesn't have Ravi Zachariah in it. So it is an excellent book, and it goes over these key things. But first, let me read you the back cover. So, the case for faith. Strobel turns his skills to the most present emotional objections to belief, the ache the heart and barriers to faith. The case for faith is for those who may be feeling attracted to Jesus, but who are faced with intellectual barriers standing squarely in their path. For Christians, it will deepen their convictions and give them a fresh conviction in discussing the Christian faith with even with those most skeptical friends. And it does do that. Let's get a little more detail and let's look at specifically what some of the chapters have to talk about. The first one, objection number one, is since evil and suffering exist, a loving God cannot exist. This is the problem of evil. If anything, there was the one of the main questions that Charles Templeton wrestled with was a problem of evil, and the first chapter addresses this. This is a question that all Christians should come to reconciliation, understand what is the answer to the problem of evil. It is a question that most Christians at some point in life have to wrestle with, and most apologists have wrestled with themselves, including C.S. Lewis. That was one of his objections, and many other people. And so this is an important question. The second one is since miracles contradict science, they cannot be true. And this is for a lot of secular people, unbelievers. This is a hard thing. If you grew up in Western society, the idea of miracles is just beyond understanding comprehension. How can it be? That's just scientific, um, magical, wishful thinking. And Lee Strobel deals with this. Now, since uh, recently, he's actually come up with a book just on the topic for the case for miracles. So you actually get a whole book just on this. And if I believe J.P. Moreland actually has a large book about miracles. So that's the second objection he looks at. The third one is evolution explains life, so God isn't needed. To some degree, we talk about this in a case for creator. He deals with this, but in case for faith is, does evolution take God out of picture? And what's the answer to that question? This is why some people do leave the faith. Some leave the faith because they're exposed to evolution. Evolution explains life, supposedly, and because supposedly explains life, therefore we don't need God, and so therefore we don't believe in. So he deals with that question. Objection number 4: God isn't worthy of worship if he kills innocent children. And there are those passages in the Bible where it looks like God is condemning both women and children, and how we address these things, especially with the Canaanites and other scenarios. What is the solution? Because it is a real problem that we need to have an answer to. And by the way, uh, not only do you need to answer that for unbelievers, you got to answer that for yourself. And you need to have that answer in mind, because if you need to communicate to your kid, because if your unbelievers don't ask you, your children will ask you this question at some point in their life. And it's good to have a good answer to that question. Objection number 4 is offensive to claim that Jesus is the only way to God. And he deals with right. This is, he's dealing with this pluralistic, relativistic view of religion, that all roads lead to Rome, and all roads lead to God, and isn't it Christianity being exclusive? And he deals with this problem of, is Christianity just being intolerant of other religions? Again, we need to answer this question. And like I said, your kids are going to ask you about this. It's one of the most popular questions that I get talk about is this one. The next one is, a loving God would never torture people in hell. I just got done with going over the fundamentals of faith in a book called The Story of Reality by Greg Koukl, and one of the last things we go over is hell, and would God send people to hell? Is it right that God sends people to hell? Why do we deal with this? I mean, it's a hard idea, and if God's love, then how can he do something so horrific? And we have to answer that question. And for some degree, you got to answer for that self, because a lot of people have a lot of angst, and they've struggled. Why would God send people to hell? And it's good to have an answer to that question. And again, your kids and other people are going to ask that questions, and that's these are all popular objections that you'll run into with unbelievers. Number 7, church history is littered with oppressive and violence. And my one, it changed it just a little bit. It said, church history is littered with oppression. Oh, no, it is same thing. Oppression and violence, and so it deals with this problem. There is a real problem in church history where the church did do some horrific thing and condone some really awful things. And so how do we deal with this, that the church condones some things that just seem wrong? This is wrong. I mean, and there's nothing that we could do to make it sound better. The church did do some wrong things. And how do we come to reconcile that with Christianity? And again, kids who go to school, that's number one. That's one of the main ones they get hit with. And unbelievers hit Christians with that one all the time. You got to have an answer to that question. Objection number 8, I still have doubt, so I can't be a Christian. And can you be a Christian and have doubts or questions or uncertainty? Can you be Christian, or do you have to blindly believe it and not have any doubt or questions? Um, and I'll tell you what, just to give you a clue, the fact that Lee Strobel wrote these books, showed that you can be a Christian and still be wrestling through some stuff. Um, and the last thing I love about this book is a reminder is his hope and prayers for Charles Templeton to change. Searcher sends Charles Templeton when Lee Strobel interviewed him, his health was on his way out. So that was unfortunate. And so Charles Templeton's story is a cautionary tale of why we need to have answers to these questions. Because if people don't get answers to these questions, they will leave the faith. And so I highly recommend uh, Case for Faith by Lee Strobel. I'm going to give you there's the new one. And read it, enjoy it, take notes. You can see for me, I have tablatures in it. I like writing my books. So you kind of see I make notes in my books. I think it's the best way. He also has workbooks and DVDs, but I always like the books the best. Workbooks are supplemental. The DVDs, what I would do is I would read the book, and then after I read it, watch a DVD. Kind of brings it all together. Also, it's really neat because he actually in the DVD he actually does the interview. He does another interview with Charles Templeton, so you get to see him in person. And the nice thing about when you see Charles Templeton, there's a longing for God, there's a longing for Jesus, but because of these questions, he just can't get himself to believe it anymore. And so it's a real good time. I enjoyed the book. I highly recommend Case for Faith by Lee Strobel. All right, have a great day and God bless.